There are moments that split a life in two, before and after. Elena was 21 years old when she learned that innocence is not the absence of desire. It is the fear of what happens when you finally let yourself feel. She had been untouched by love, not because the world had ignored her, but because she had built walls so high that even sunlight struggled to reach her skin. She wore white dresses and kept her eyes down. She believed safety was the same thing as living. And then she met him. Dante Moretti didn't ask for permission. He didn't knock. He walked into her life the way a storm walks into a quiet town. Inevitable, devastating, impossible to forget. He was a mafia boss, a man carved from shadows and secrets. And when he looked at her, she felt something she had never felt before, the terrifying, intoxicating pull of temptation. Some stories begin with a whisper. This one began with a heartbeat that forgot its rhythm. If you believe love can bloom in the darkest places, if you've ever felt drawn to someone you were never meant to touch, then stay with us now. Because some stories aren't just about love. They're about surrender. They're about the moment you realize that the most dangerous thing in the world isn't falling. It's landing in the arms of someone who could destroy you and choosing to stay anyway. Tell us in the comments, have you ever met someone who changed everything? And if this story moves you, subscribe, because tonight we're telling the truth about what happens when innocence meets temptation, and neither one walks away unchanged. There would come a night, weeks from now, when Dante would press her against the marble wall of his private study, his hand cradling the back of her neck like she was something holy, and he would kiss her so slowly that time itself seemed to hold its breath. Eleanor would taste whiskey and danger and something darker still, the kind of hunger that doesn't ask, it claims. And in that moment, she would understand that love is not gentle, it is not soft. It is fire, and you either run from it or you let it consume you whole. But that moment hadn't happened yet. First, there was the night she crossed the threshold of his world without knowing it was a door she could never walk back through. She had gone to deliver flowers, white lilies for a funeral, delicate and pale as her own carefully constructed life. She didn't know the man in the casket had betrayed Dante. She didn't know the mourners were watching her with eyes that calculated worth and weakness. She only knew that when she turned to leave, he was standing there, tall, silent, dressed in black that seemed to swallow the light, and he was looking at her the way a man looks at something he's already decided to keep. Maybe you know what it's like to feel invisible your whole life, and then suddenly, unbearably, seen. Maybe you understand the terror of being wanted by someone who doesn't know how to want softly. Maybe you felt the pull of something forbidden and hated yourself for wanting it anyway. Eleanor did. And she would spend the next months learning that the most dangerous kind of power isn't the kind that breaks you. It's the kind that makes you want to be broken. There would be blood. Not hers. Not at first. But she would see it. Taste it in the air. Learn that the man who touched her so carefully in the dark was the same man who could end a life with a single word. She would lie awake at night, wondering if love and fear could live in the same heartbeat, wondering if she was falling, or if she had already fallen and the ground was simply taking its time arriving. Forbidden love is not a story, it is a scar you wear for the rest of your life. But here's what they don't tell you about mafia bosses and innocent girls. Sometimes the monster is the only one who sees you clearly. Sometimes danger is the only place you've ever felt safe. Sometimes surrender is not weakness, it's the bravest thing you'll ever do. Her world smelled like fresh bread and her mother's jasmine perfume. His smelled like leather and gunpowder and expensive cologne that cost more than her monthly rent. Her world was soft morning light through lace curtains. His was the kind of darkness that had its own gravity. She lived in a small apartment above a flower shop. He lived in a fortress with marble floors and men who would die at his command. And somehow, impossibly, these two worlds collided. The first time he touched her hand, it was to stop her from leaving. The second time, it was to pull her closer. The third time, it was to teach her that some things, once touched, can never be untouched again. This is the story of Elena and Dante, of innocence and temptation, of the line between salvation and ruin, and what happens when you stop caring which side you're on. Eleanor had learned to make herself small before she even understood why. It started young, the way she tucked her hands under the table during dinner, the way she kept her laughter quiet, the way she never looked men directly in the eye. Her mother had taught her that a good girl is like a whisper, heard, but never too loud, Felt, but never too much. Her father had died when she was 7, and after that her mother wrapped her in rules the way other mothers wrap their children in blankets. Stay close. Trust no one. The world is not safe for girls like you. And Eleanor believed her. She worked at the flower shop 6 days a week, her hands always smelling like roses and eucalyptus. She arranged bouquets for weddings she would never attend, for anniversaries she had never experienced, for funerals of strangers whose names she would never know. She was 21, but she felt older. Not because she had lived, but because she had spent so many years watching life happen to other people. At night, she would sit by her window and watch couples walk hand in hand down the cobblestone street, and she would wonder what it felt like to be held that way, to be wanted that way, to be anything other than careful. Her friends, the few she had, called her old-fashioned. They didn't understand why she didn't date, why she didn't drink, why she never stayed out past 10. They didn't know that every time a man looked at her with interest, she felt a cold fist of fear close around her heart, not because she didn't want to be seen, but because she was terrified of what might happen if she was. Her mother's voice lived in her head like a second pulse. Men take, they don't give, they don't stay, they ruin girls like you and walk away. So Elena stayed small. She wore modest dresses in pale colors, cream, soft gray, the palest blush pink. She kept her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. She never wore makeup, except for a touch of lip balm that tasted like vanilla. She moved through the world like a ghost, and she told herself this was safety. This was smart. This was survival. But late at night, when she couldn't sleep, she would press her hand to her chest and feel her own heartbeat, and wonder if this was really living, or if she was just marking time until she disappeared completely. The flower shop was on a quiet street in the old part of the city, where the buildings were made of stone, and the air always smelled faintly of bread from the bakery 2 doors down. She knew every customer by name. Mrs. Caruso, who bought yellow tulips every Friday. Mr. Benedetti, who ordered red roses for his wife every anniversary. The young couple who came in holding hands, picking out flowers for their new apartment. Elena arranged their bouquets with careful hands, and she smiled, and she never let anyone see the ache that lived behind her ribs. She had been untouched her whole life, not just physically, though that was true too. No boy had ever kissed her. No man had ever held her hand with intention. But it was more than that. She had been untouched by risk, untouched by wildness, untouched by the kind of feeling that makes you forget to be afraid. She had built a life that was safe and quiet and predictable, and she told herself it was enough. Until the afternoon, a black car pulled up outside the shop and everything changed. She didn't know it yet, but the girl who lived in whispers was about to meet a man who only spoke in storms. It was a Tuesday in late September when the order came in, a funeral arrangement. White lilies, 50 stems to be delivered to the Moretti estate by 4 o'clock. Elena's boss, Signora Russo, had taken the order over the phone, and when she hung up, her face had gone pale. She looked at Elena with something that might have been pity or warning or both. "You'll need to deliver this one yourself," she said quietly. "And Eleanor, be respectful. Don't ask questions. Don't linger." Eleanor didn't understand the weight in her voice. She wrapped the lilies carefully in white paper and loaded them into the shop's small delivery van. The address led her out of the familiar streets, past the old churches and family-owned restaurants, into a part of the city she had only seen from a distance. The buildings here were different, larger, more imposing, wrapped in iron gates and silence. The Moretti estate sat at the end of a private drive, a sprawling villa made of pale stone with tall windows that reflected the sky like mirrors. There were men at the gate. They didn't smile. One of them checked her van, peered into the back, asked her name. She told them, her voice small, her hands gripping the steering wheel. He nodded once, spoke into a radio, and the gate rolled open. As she drove up the long driveway, her heart was beating too fast. She didn't know why. There was something in the air here, something heavy, something watchful. The trees lining the drive were old and tall, their branches creating shadows that felt deliberate. She parked near the side entrance where she'd been directed, and when she stepped out, the silence was so complete, it felt like a held breath. She carried the lilies to the door. It opened before she could knock. A man in a dark suit looked at her without expression. "The flowers?" She nodded, holding them out. He took them, inspected them briefly, then gestured for her to follow. You'll need to bring them inside. The viewing room is through here. Eleanor hesitated. I usually just leave them at the door. Inside, he repeated. Not a request. So she followed. The inside of the villa was as imposing as the outside. All marble floors and high ceilings, and the kind of quiet that makes you aware of your own breathing. She could hear voices from somewhere deeper in the house, low and measured. Her footsteps echoed. The man led her down a long hallway lined with oil paintings of stern-faced men in old-fashioned suits, and then through a set of double doors into a room that smelled like lilies and something darker, incense maybe, or expensive wood. There was a casket at the far end of the room, closed, surrounded by flowers, so many flowers, and there were people, men, mostly, in dark suits, standing in small groups, speaking in voices too low to hear, a few women in black dresses, and then she saw him. He was standing near the casket, his back to her, and even from behind he commanded the space. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a black suit that fit him like it had been tailored to his body. His dark hair was slightly too long, curling just above his collar, and when he turned, when his eyes found her across the room, Eleanor forgot how to breathe. He didn't smile. He didn't move. He just looked at her with eyes so dark they were almost black, and she felt the weight of that gaze like a physical touch. It wasn't polite. It wasn't curious. It was something else entirely, something that made her skin prickle and her pulse stumble. She had never been looked at like that before, like she was a problem to be solved, a door to be opened, a secret he already knew. She looked away first, her cheeks burning, and focused on arranging the lilies with trembling hands. She could still feel him watching her. The air in the room felt different now, thicker, charged like the moment before lightning strikes. She finished as quickly as she could, her fingers clumsy, and when she turned to leave, he was closer. Not close enough to touch, but close enough that she could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive, cedar and smoke. "Who are you?" His voice was low, quiet, but it carried. It wasn't a casual question. It was a demand wrapped in silk. I'm from the flower shop. I'm delivering the arrangement." "Your name?" She swallowed. "Elena." He said nothing for a long moment, just studied her face like he was memorizing it. And then, so quietly she almost didn't hear him, "You don't belong here." It wasn't a threat. It was a fact. And it made something in her chest twist, because she knew he was right. She didn't belong in this world of marble and silence, and men who looked at her like she was prey. But before she could respond, before she could apologize or leave or do anything, another man approached, older, with silver hair and cold eyes, and spoke to him in rapid Italian. The man, Dante, though she didn't know his name yet, glanced at her once more, a look she couldn't decipher, and then turned away. Elena left. She walked back through the hallway, back to her van, back to her small, safe life. But she couldn't stop thinking about the way he had looked at her. Like he could see every secret she'd ever kept. His name was Dante Moretti, and he was not a good man. This is important to understand. He was not a man who made mistakes and regretted them. He was not a man who believed in redemption. He had been born into power and violence, raised in a world where loyalty was currency and betrayal was death. His father had been a mafia boss before him, and his grandfather before that. The Moretti name carried weight in the city, the kind of weight that made politicians nervous and rival families careful. Dante had taken over the family business at 25 after his father's murder, and in the 7 years since, he had built an empire that was both feared and respected. He owned legitimate businesses, restaurants, real estate, import companies, but everyone knew the truth. The money flowed from darker places, protection rackets, loan sharking, the kind of business that happened in shadows and ended with handshakes or blood, depending on how the conversation went. Dante was ruthless when he needed to be, which was often. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. When he spoke, people listened. When he gave an order, it was followed. And when someone betrayed him, well, that's why there had been a funeral. The man in the casket, Marco Vitale, had been one of Dante's captains. Trusted, or so Dante had thought. But Marco had been skimming money, making deals with a rival family, thinking he was clever enough to get away with it. He wasn't. Dante had known for weeks. He'd watched. He'd waited. And when the time was right, he'd ended it. Not with his own hands. He rarely dirtied his hands anymore, but with a word. A name spoken in the right ear. Marco had been found in his car, 2 bullets in the chest, and now his family was mourning him in Dante's villa, because even in death, Dante controlled the narrative. That was the world Elena had walked into without knowing it, and Dante had seen her immediately. Of course he had. She was impossible to miss, not because she was trying to be noticed, but because she was so obviously, painfully out of place. White dress, nervous hands, eyes that darted around the room like she was afraid of what she might see. She moved carefully, like someone who had spent her whole life trying not to take up space. And when she'd looked at him, just for a second, before she looked away, he'd seen something he hadn't seen in a long time. Innocence, not naivety, not stupidity, but real, genuine innocence. The kind that didn't exist in his world. The kind he'd forgotten was even possible, and it had done something to him. Stirred something in his chest that he didn't have a name for. Curiosity, maybe, or hunger, or something more dangerous. He'd asked her name because he wanted to know if she was real or if he'd imagined her. Elena. Soft, old-fashioned. The kind of name that belonged to a different era, when women wore gloves and men wrote love letters. It suited her, and when she'd answered him with that quiet, trembling voice, he'd felt something shift. He didn't know what it was. He didn't like not knowing. But he filed it away, tucked it into the part of his mind where he kept things that required further investigation, because Dante Moretti didn't believe in accidents, and a girl like Elena walking into his world, untouched, unaware, fragile as spun glass, felt like fate testing him. The rest of the funeral passed in a blur of condolences he didn't care about and conversations he barely listened to. His mind kept circling back to her, to the way she'd held those lilies like they mattered, to the way she'd looked at him, afraid, yes, but also curious, like she wanted to understand him but didn't know how to ask. He wondered if she knew who he was. Probably not. Girls like her didn't move in his circles. They didn't know the names whispered in dark rooms or the faces that appeared in newspaper articles about organized crime. She was clean, and he was very, very not. That night, after everyone had left and the villa was quiet again, Dante stood in his study with a glass of whiskey and thought about her. This was unusual. He didn't think about women. He had them when he wanted them. Carefully chosen, never complicated, always temporary. He didn't do relationships, he didn't do feelings. Those were luxuries he couldn't afford, weaknesses that got men killed. But he couldn't stop seeing her face, the way she'd looked at him, the way she'd looked away. He picked up his phone and made a call. His voice was calm, measured. "I need information on someone, a girl, works at a flower shop on Via Margherita. Name's Elena. I want to know everything, where she lives, who she knows, what she does, and I want it by morning." "Of course, boss," came the reply. Dante hung up and took another sip of whiskey. He told himself it was just due diligence. You didn't survive in his world by ignoring loose ends. A girl who'd seen his face, who'd been inside his home, who could potentially be used against him. She needed to be vetted. That's all this was. That's what he told himself. But deep down, in a place he rarely acknowledged, he knew the truth. He wanted to see her again. And Dante Moretti always got what he wanted. Some men are made of light. Dante was made of shadows. And he'd just decided to cast his shadow over Elena's world. 3 days later, he came to the flower shop. Elena was alone. Signora Russo had gone to the market, and she was in the back room cutting stems for a wedding bouquet when she heard the bell above the door chime. She wiped her hands on her apron and walked out to the front, her customer service smile already in place. And then she saw him, and the smile died on her lips. Dante Moretti stood in the middle of her small shop, looking impossibly out of place among the daisies and roses and baby's breath. He was dressed more casually today. Dark jeans, a black shirt, a leather jacket, but he still carried that weight, that presence. The room felt smaller with him in it. He was looking at her with the same unreadable expression he'd worn at the funeral, and she felt her heart start to race. "You," she breathed. What are you doing here?" "I want to order flowers," he said simply. She blinked. "Flowers?" "Yes. Is that a problem?" No, of course not." She moved behind the counter, grateful for the physical barrier between them, and pulled out the order book with shaking hands. What kind of arrangement are you looking for?" "I don't know. You're the expert." He moved closer, leaned against the counter, and she could smell him again. that dark, expensive scent that made her think of things she'd never experienced. Danger, sin, temptation. What would you recommend? Eleanor's mind went blank. She couldn't think. She could barely breathe. He was too close, too focused on her. It depends on the occasion, she managed. Is it for someone special? His lips curved slightly. Not quite a smile, but close. You could say that. Something in her chest twisted. Of course. A man like him would have someone, probably someone beautiful, sophisticated. Everything Elena wasn't. She swallowed and forced herself to focus. Then maybe roses. Red roses are traditional for— Not roses, he interrupted. Something else, something— He paused, his dark eyes moving over her face, and she felt naked under that gaze. Innocent. Her breath caught. Lilies, she said quietly. White lilies. They represent purity. Innocence. Perfect. He didn't look away from her. I'll take 24, delivered. Of course. When would you— Tomorrow, evening. I'll give you the address. I already have your address. From the funeral. No. His voice was firm. Different address. This is personal. He pulled a business card from his pocket and slid it across the counter. Elena picked it up with trembling fingers. It had an address she didn't recognize, and a phone number, and his name in elegant script, Dante Moretti. No title, no explanation, just his name like it was the only thing that mattered. Tomorrow, he repeated. 6 o'clock. Deliver them yourself. I usually don't do evening deliveries. Make an exception. Not a request, a command. But said so quietly, so calmly, that it didn't feel aggressive. It felt inevitable, like arguing would be pointless. Please, he added, and the word sounded foreign in his mouth, like he didn't use it often. Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. He straightened, pushed off from the counter, and for a moment she thought he would leave. But then he reached out, slowly, giving her time to move away if she wanted, and touched her hand where it rested on the counter. Just his fingertips against her knuckles. The contact lasted maybe 3 seconds, but it burned. It sent electricity racing up her arm and straight to her chest, and she gasped without meaning to. He pulled back, his expression unreadable. Tomorrow, Elena. And then he was gone. She stood there for a long time, staring at the spot where he'd touched her, her hand tingling, her heart hammering against her ribs. She didn't understand what was happening, why he'd come to her shop, why he wanted flowers, why he'd touched her like that, carefully, almost reverently, like he was testing something. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She was going to deliver those lilies tomorrow at 6 o'clock, even though every instinct she had was screaming at her to run. Because for the first time in her 21 years, Elena felt something stronger than fear. She felt curious. She felt alive. She felt like maybe, just maybe, she wanted to know what it felt like to be touched by someone who looked at her like she mattered, even if he was dangerous, even if it was forbidden, even if it would ruin her. That night she lay awake in her small bed, staring at the ceiling, and tried to convince herself that this was a bad idea, that she should tell Signora Russo, that she should refuse to deliver the flowers, that she should forget about Dante Moretti and his dark eyes and the way he'd said her name like it was something precious. But she knew she wouldn't, because temptation doesn't announce itself with trumpets and warnings. It whispers, and Elena was tired of being deaf. The address he'd given her was for a luxury apartment building in the heart of the city, all glass and steel and doormen in pristine uniforms. Eleanor pulled up in the flower shop's van at exactly 6 o'clock, her palms sweating, her mouth dry. She'd changed clothes 3 times before leaving, finally settling on a simple cream-colored dress that felt appropriate, but also made her feel pretty in a way she usually didn't let herself feel. She'd even put on lipstick. Just a touch. Barely there. The doorman checked her name against a list and nodded. Mr. Moretti is expecting you. Penthouse, private elevator. He gestured to a separate entrance away from the main lobby. Of course, he lived in the penthouse. The elevator was sleek and silent, with mirrored walls that forced Elena to look at herself. She looked nervous, young, out of her depth. The lilies in her arms smelled sweet and clean, and she focused on that, on the flowers, on the job, on anything except the fact that her heart was beating so hard she could feel it in her throat. The elevator doors opened directly into his apartment. No hallway, no neighbors, just his space. It was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, hardwood floors, minimalist furniture in blacks and greys and deep blues. There was art on the walls, real art, not prints. A piano in one corner, shelves lined with books. It was elegant and masculine and spotlessly clean, and it felt nothing like the marble fortress of the estate. This felt private, personal, intimate. Eleanor. She turned, and there he was, emerging from what looked like a study. He was dressed down, grey slacks, a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, barefoot. She'd never seen a man look so dangerous while barefoot. His dark hair was slightly messy, like he'd been running his hands through it, and his eyes found hers immediately. "You came," he said, and there was something in his voice. Relief, maybe, or satisfaction. "You asked me to," she replied quietly. "I did." He moved closer, his eyes dropping to the lilies. "They're beautiful. Thank you. Where would you like them?" "The dining table. I'll show you." He led her through the apartment, and she was hyper-aware of him beside her. The way he moved, fluid and confident, the way the space seemed to bend around him. The dining table was a long slab of dark wood, simple and elegant, and she set the lilies down carefully, arranging them just so. "These aren't actually for anyone, are they?" she asked before she could stop herself. He was quiet for a moment, then, "No." She turned to face him, confused. "Then why?" "I wanted to see you again. Simple. Direct. No games. And I didn't know how else to do it without frightening you." Her breath caught. "By ordering flowers? By showing up at your door? By calling you? By doing any of the things I actually wanted to do?" He took a step closer. "You're afraid of me." It wasn't a question. She should deny it. Should say something polite. But she'd never been good at lying. "A little," she admitted. "You should be." Another step. He was close now, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to look at him. "I'm not a good man, Elena. I'm not the kind of man you should be alone with in a private apartment." "Then why am I here?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Because I asked you to come." His eyes were so dark, so intense, and because some part of you wanted to say yes. She couldn't deny it, couldn't look away. Her heart was racing, her skin felt too hot, and there was something building between them, something electric, something dangerous. He reached out slowly, giving her time to step back, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. His fingers were warm, gentle. It was the second time he'd touched her, and it felt like the first time anyone had ever really touched her at all. "Tell me to stop," he said quietly. "Stop what?" "This." His hand moved to cup her face, his thumb brushing over her cheekbone. "Tell me to let you go. Tell me you don't feel this." But she couldn't, because she did feel it. She felt it in every nerve ending, every rapid heartbeat, every shallow breath. She felt it in the way her body leaned toward him without her permission, in the way her eyes kept dropping to his mouth. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why me?" "I don't know." And he sounded honest, frustrated even. "I've been trying to figure that out for 3 days. You're nothing like the women I usually—" He stopped, shook his head. "You walked into that funeral looking like you'd stumbled into the wrong universe, like you were lost, and I couldn't stop thinking about you. You don't know anything about me." "I know enough." His thumb traced her lower lip, barely a touch, and she shivered. "I know you work 6 days a week at that flower shop. I know you live alone in a small apartment 2 blocks from your mother. I know you've never been in a relationship. I know you're afraid of everything except the flowers you arrange with those careful hands." She should be alarmed that he knew so much. She should run. "You investigated me," she said. "Yes, that's— I know what it is." His hand dropped from her face, but he didn't step back. "I won't apologize for it. I don't apologize for the things I need to do. And what do you need from me?" The question came out braver than she felt. Dante was silent for a long moment, his eyes searching hers, and then, so quietly she almost didn't hear it, "I don't know yet, but I think I'm about to find out." He leaned down, slowly, so slowly, and she had 1,000 chances to move away, 1,000 chances to say no, but she didn't. She stood there, frozen, breathless, as his mouth hovered just above hers, not touching, not yet, just close enough that she could feel the warmth of his breath. "Tell me no," he whispered. "Tell me to stay away from you. Tell me you don't want this." But Elena had been saying no her whole life. No to risk, no to danger, no to anything that might hurt her. And she was so tired of being safe, so tired of watching life happen to other people. So instead of saying no, she rose up on her toes, just an inch, just enough, and kissed him. It was soft at first, uncertain. Her lips against his, barely a touch, more question than answer. But then his hand came up to cradle the back of her head, and he kissed her back, and soft became something else entirely. He kissed her like he was savoring something rare, like she was something precious and forbidden and utterly intoxicating. His mouth moved against hers with a slow, deliberate hunger that made her knees weak, and when his tongue brushed against her lower lip, she opened for him without thinking. The taste of him flooded her senses. Whiskey and mint and something darker, something that was just him. Her hands came up to grip his shirt, holding on because she needed something solid, something real, and he pulled her closer, one hand still cradling her head, the other settling on her waist, and she felt the strength in him, the carefully controlled power, the way he was holding himself back. When he finally pulled away, they were both breathing hard. His forehead rested against hers and his eyes were closed. "That," he said roughly, "was a very bad idea." "I know," she whispered. "You should leave." "I know." But neither of them moved, because some doors, once opened, cannot be closed again. She didn't leave. He didn't ask her to again. Instead, Dante poured her a glass of wine, something Italian and expensive that tasted like summer, and they sat on his balcony overlooking the city as the sun set and painted everything gold. Elena should have been nervous, should have been afraid, but sitting there with the warm evening air on her skin and the sound of the city below, she felt strangely calm, like she'd stepped into a dream and decided not to wake up. "Tell me about yourself," he said, his voice low and easy. He sat across from her, his long legs stretched out, his wine glass held loosely in one hand. "There's nothing to tell." "I doubt that." She shrugged. "I'm boring. I work. I go home. I read. I help my mother on Sundays. That's my life." "Do you like it?" No one had ever asked her that before. She considered the question, turning her wine glass in her hands. "I thought I did. It felt safe. And now?" "Now I don't know." She looked at him. "Now I'm sitting on a balcony with a man who terrifies me, and I should want to leave. But I don't." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I don't want to terrify you." "Then what do you want?" He was quiet for a long moment, his eyes on the skyline. When he finally spoke, his voice was honest in a way that surprised her. "I don't know. I've spent the last 3 days trying to figure it out, trying to talk myself out of this. You're not like anyone I've ever—" He trailed off, shook his head. "I don't do this. I don't sit with women and drink wine and talk. I don't kiss innocent girls and feel guilty about it. Do you feel guilty?" "Yes." "Why?" He looked at her then, really looked at her, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "Because I know what I am, Elena. I know the world I live in. And you're light. You're good. And I'm going to ruin you if you let me get too close." "Maybe I want to be ruined," she whispered. The air between them went still. Dante set his wine glass down carefully, stood, and crossed to her. He crouched in front of her chair so they were eye level, and he took her hands in his. His grip was firm but gentle. "Don't say things like that unless you mean them." "I do mean them." She was surprised by her own certainty. "I've spent my whole life being good, being careful, being untouched, and I'm tired of it. I'm tired of being afraid. You should be afraid of me." "I know." She squeezed his hands. "But I'm more afraid of going back to the way things were, of never knowing what this feels like." "What does this feel like?" His voice was rough. "Like I'm finally awake." Something in his expression shifted, softened, and then he was kissing her again, but this time it was different. This time it was slower, deeper, more deliberate. He kissed her like he was memorizing her, like he wanted to learn every sound she made, every way she responded to him. And Elena, who had never been kissed before 3 hours ago, kissed him back with a hunger she didn't know she possessed. They didn't go further than kissing that night. Dante pulled back before things could escalate, his breathing uneven, his control clearly tested. "Not yet," he said, his forehead against hers. "Not like this. Not when you're not ready." "I feel ready," she admitted. "You're not." He brushed his thumb over her swollen lips. "Trust me. When it happens, you'll know. And I want you to be sure. I want you to choose it. Not because I'm overwhelming you, or because you're caught up in the moment, but because you want it. She should have been frustrated, but instead she felt something else, respected, seen. He was giving her time, space to choose, and that felt more intimate than anything else he could have done. He called her a car to take her home, and when she protested that she had the van, he shook his head. I'll have someone return it to the shop tomorrow. You're not driving after wine. And Elena, he caught her hand as she moved toward the door. I want to see you again. Okay. Tomorrow. Dinner. He'll pick you up at 7. That's fast. I don't like waiting. He kissed her hand, a gesture that felt old-fashioned and somehow perfect coming from him. Say yes. And Eleanor, who had never said yes to anything risky in her life, smiled. Yes. The car ride home felt surreal. She touched her lips, still feeling the ghost of his kiss. She could still smell him on her skin, still taste him. She felt changed, unraveled, like he'd taken the carefully constructed walls she'd built around herself and dismantled them brick by brick without her even noticing. When she got home, she lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, her body humming with an energy she'd never felt before. Forbidden love, that's what this was. She knew that. She knew he was dangerous, that his world was violence and shadows, that being with him could destroy the safe, quiet life she'd built. But for the first time, she didn't care, because some things are worth the risk. Some people are worth the fall. And Dante Moretti, with his dark eyes and careful hands, and the way he kissed her like she was something holy, he was worth everything. He picked her up at exactly 7 o'clock in a black car that purred like a predator, and when Elena slid into the passenger seat, he looked at her like she'd stolen something from him. You look beautiful, he said simply. She'd worn a simple black dress, the nicest thing she owned, though it still felt inadequate compared to his tailored suit, but the way he was looking at her made her feel like she was draped in diamonds. Thank you. He drove them to a restaurant she'd never heard of, the kind of place with no sign, just a single door in a narrow alley, guarded by a man who nodded respectfully when he saw Dante. Inside it was elegant and intimate, all candlelight and exposed brick and tables spaced far enough apart that conversations stayed private. The maitre d' greeted Dante by name and led them to a corner table, the best in the house. Come here often, Elena asked, trying for lightness. I own it, Dante replied casually, and she realized she was going to have to recalibrate her understanding of what normal meant in his world. They ordered wine and food that Elena couldn't even pronounce, and for a while they just talked. He asked her about her childhood, about her father's death, about what she wanted from life. She was surprised by how easy it was to talk to him, how he listened, really listened, like every word mattered. She'd expected him to be distant, guarded, but here, in this quiet corner, he was present in a way that made her feel like the only person in the world. What about you? She asked eventually. Tell me about your family. His expression shuttered slightly. What do you want to know? Anything, everything. I know nothing about you except that you're what you are, what I am. He took a sip of wine. What do you think I am, Elena? She met his eyes. Dangerous, powerful, someone people fear. And that doesn't bother you? It should, she admitted. But somehow it doesn't. Or maybe it does, and I just don't care anymore. He studied her for a long moment, and then he began to talk about his family, about growing up in a world where violence was currency and loyalty was everything, about losing his father at 25 and having to take over the business before he was ready, about the weight of leading men who would die at his word, the burden of making decisions that affected dozens of families. I never had a choice, he said quietly. This life was decided for me before I was born. Moretti blood means Moretti responsibilities. Do you ever wish you could walk away? Every day. The honesty in his voice surprised her. But I can't. Too many people depend on me, and too many people would see it as weakness. In my world, weakness is death. That sounds lonely. It is. He reached across the table and took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. Until now, her heart stuttered. Dante, I know this is fast. I know it doesn't make sense. But I haven't felt anything real in years, Elena. And then you walked into that funeral with your white dress and your nervous hands, and something in me just woke up. She wanted to say something profound, something that matched the weight of his confession, but all she could manage was, I feel it too. His grip on her hand tightened. I'm going to hurt you eventually. You need to know that. Not because I want to, but because it's what I do. This world, my world, it destroys beautiful things. Then maybe I'm not as fragile as you think. Or maybe you're exactly as fragile as I think, and I'm selfish enough not to care. He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. I should let you go. I should tell you to forget about me and find some nice normal man who works 9 to 5 and comes home to dinner every night. Someone safe. But you won't. No. His eyes were dark and honest. I won't. Because I want you too much. And I've never been good at denying myself what I want. The honesty was intoxicating. No games, no pretense. Just raw truth laid out between them like an offering. They finished dinner and walked through the city, his hand at the small of her back, guiding her through streets she'd never explored. He showed her hidden courtyards and old fountains, and told her stories about the city's history that made it feel alive in a way it never had before. And when they ended up back at his apartment, she didn't hesitate before following him inside. This time, when he kissed her, there was less restraint. His hands moved over her body, still careful, still controlled, but with more confidence. He backed her against the wall of his living room, his body pressed against hers, and kissed her like he was trying to memorize her taste. She gripped his shoulders, her nails digging in through the fabric of his shirt, and when he pulled back, they were both breathing hard. Tell me to stop, he said, his voice rough. No, Eleanor, I want this. She looked up at him, her eyes clear. I want you. I'm not drunk. I'm not confused. I know what I'm doing. You don't know what you're asking for. Then show me. Something in his control snapped. He lifted her, easily, like she weighed nothing, and carried her to his bedroom. And there in the darkness, punctuated only by city lights filtering through the windows, he showed her what temptation really meant. He undressed her slowly, reverently, like she was something sacred. Every revealed inch of skin was met with kisses, with gentle touches, with murmured words in Italian that she didn't understand but felt in her bones. And when he finally made her his, it was slow and careful, and laced with a tenderness she hadn't expected from a man made of shadows. It hurt at first, the breaking of something that could never be remade, but he held her through it, whispered reassurances, moved with a gentleness that made her heart ache, and then the pain transformed into something else, something that made her gasp and arch and cling to him like he was the only solid thing in a tilting world. Afterward, they lay tangled together, her head on his chest, his hand stroking her hair. She could hear his heartbeat beneath her ear, steady, strong, real. Are you okay? He asked quietly. Yes. And she meant it. She felt changed, yes. Different, but not ruined, not broken, awakened. Stay tonight, he murmured against her hair. Okay. She fell asleep in his arms, wrapped in expensive sheets that smelled like him, and for the first time in her life, Elena felt like she belonged somewhere, even if that somewhere was dangerous, even if it was forbidden. It was hers. Elena woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the smell of coffee. For a moment she was disoriented. This wasn't her small apartment. This wasn't her lumpy mattress. And then memory flooded back and her cheeks burned. She'd slept with Dante Moretti. She'd given him her innocence, her virginity, the thing she'd protected for 21 years. And she didn't regret it. Not even a little bit. She was wearing one of his shirts. She didn't remember putting it on, which meant he must have dressed her while she slept. And when she padded out of the bedroom on bare feet, she found him in the kitchen. He was dressed in slacks and a white shirt, already looking ready for the day, and he was making breakfast. Actual breakfast. Eggs and toast and fruit arranged on 2 plates. He looked up when she entered, and something in his expression softened. Good morning. Hi. She felt suddenly shy, wrapping her arms around herself. He crossed to her, cupped her face in his hands, and kissed her forehead. It was such a tender gesture, so at odds with his dangerous reputation that it made her throat tight. How do you feel? I'm okay, she smiled. Better than okay, actually. Good. He guided her to the kitchen island and pulled out a stool for her. Eat. You need food. She sat, watched him move around his kitchen with easy confidence, and felt something bloom in her chest. This man, this dangerous, powerful man, was making her breakfast, was treating her like she was precious. It was surreal. What happens now? She asked as they ate. He looked at her, his dark eyes serious. What do you want to happen? I don't know. I don't know how this works. This, he said, gesturing between them, isn't casual for me. I need you to know that. I don't do casual. What are you saying? I'm saying I want you to be mine. Simple, direct. Exclusively. I don't share, Elena. And if you're going to be in my life, you're all in. No half measures. Her heart was racing. That's a lot. I know. He reached across the counter and took her hand. And I know it's fast. But I'm 32 years old, and I've never felt like this about anyone. So I'm not going to pretend this is something it's not. I want you. I want to see you every day. I want you to be part of my life. Your life is dangerous. Yes, people could use me against you. They could try. His voice went hard. They wouldn't succeed. I protect what's mine, Elena. And if you agree to this, you'll be the most protected person in this city. She should be terrified. She should run. But instead she found herself asking, what would it mean, being yours? It means you tell me where you're going, who you're with. Not because I want to control you, but because I need to know you're safe. It means I assign security to follow you. It means some nights I won't be able to tell you where I'm going or what I'm doing, and you'll have to trust me anyway. It means my world becomes your world with all the complications that brings. And what do I get in return? His thumb traced her knuckles. Me, all of me, my protection, my loyalty, my affection. He seemed to struggle with the last word, like it was foreign to him. I'm not good at feelings, Elena, but I'll try. For you, I'll try. It was the most honest thing anyone had ever said to her. Okay, she whispered. His eyes snapped to hers. Okay? Yes, I want to try. I want to be with you. Even if it's crazy. Even if I don't fully understand it. I want this. The smile that spread across his face was transformative. She'd never seen him smile like that. Open, genuine, almost boyish. He stood, rounded the counter and kissed her thoroughly, his hands framing her face. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright. You won't regret this, he promised. But even as she smiled back, even as she let herself fall into the warmth of his embrace, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered, Are you sure? Because forbidden love always comes with a price. And Elena was about to learn that some prices are paid in blood. The next few weeks unfolded like a dream. Elena moved through her life at the flower shop, but everything felt different now, brighter, more vivid. She saw Dante every evening, sometimes at his apartment, sometimes at restaurants where people watched him with wary respect, sometimes just driving through the city with no destination in mind. He never pressured her, never demanded more than she was ready to give, but he was always there, constant, steady in a way that made her feel anchored. Her mother noticed the change immediately. So you're glowing, she said one Sunday over lunch. Her eyes narrowed suspiciously. What's going on? Are you seeing someone? Eleanor hesitated. She couldn't tell her mother about Dante. Her mother would panic, would forbid it, would see only the danger. Just a friend, she said carefully. Nothing serious. Her mother's gaze lingered, unconvinced, but she let it drop. The security came first, in ways she didn't notice. A man in a dark suit, who always seemed to be across the street from the flower shop, a car that followed her home at night, keeping a respectful distance. Dante had been true to his word. She was being protected, and surprisingly, it didn't feel suffocating. It felt safe. One evening, about 3 weeks in, Dante took her to meet his inner circle, the men who worked closest to him, who knew his secrets, who would die for him without question. They met at a private club, all dark wood and cigar smoke and expensive liquor. Elena wore a deep green dress Dante had bought her. She'd protested, but he'd insisted, and she'd secretly loved how his eyes had darkened when he saw her in it. The men were exactly what she'd expected. Hard-faced, watchful, respectful to Dante, and cautiously curious about her. She felt their eyes assessing her, calculating whether she was a weakness or a strength. But Dante kept his hand at the small of her back the entire time, a clear claim, and by the end of the evening, they were treating her with the same respect they showed him. They like you, Dante said later, as they drove back to his apartment. How can you tell? Because you're still alive. He glanced at her, a small smile playing at his lips. That was a joke. Was it? Mostly. He reached over and took her hand. They see what I see, that you're good, that you're different. And in my world, different is valuable. She squeezed his hand. I'm scared sometimes. Of your world. of what it means. Good. Fear keeps you careful. He brought her hand to his lips. But you don't need to be afraid with me. I won't let anything happen to you. And she believed him. Because when Dante Moretti made a promise, he kept it, even if keeping it meant painting the streets red. They learned each other slowly, carefully, like archaeologists brushing dust from something precious and breakable. Dante was patient in a way Elena hadn't expected from a man who commanded with such absolute authority. In the darkness of his bedroom, with the city lights casting shadows across the sheets, he became someone else. Still dangerous, yes, still powerful, but also tender, reverent even. He mapped her body with his hands, learning what made her gasp, what made her arch, what made her whisper his name like a prayer. And she learned him too. The scar on his shoulder from a knife fight he wouldn't talk about, the way he tensed when she kissed the inside of his wrist, the Italian words he murmured against her skin when he was too far gone to remember to speak English. Bella, mia, perfetta, beautiful, mine, perfect. She wasn't perfect. She knew that. She was clumsy in bed, uncertain of what to do with her hands, embarrassed by the sounds she made. But he never made her feel inadequate. He taught her with patience and praise, showed her how to touch him, where to kiss him, what undid his carefully maintained control. "You're a quick learner," he murmured one night, his voice rough as she moved over him, her hands braced on his chest, her dark hair falling around them like a curtain. "Good teacher," she managed, and he laughed, actually laughed, before flipping her onto her back and showing her exactly what he thought of that compliment. Afterward, wrapped in his arms, she traced the tattoos on his chest, Italian words and symbols she didn't understand. What do they mean? Loyalty, family, blood. His fingers drew patterns on her bare shoulder, reminders of what I am. "You're more than this," she said softly. "More than the Mafia, more than the violence." "Am I?" He sounded uncertain, which was rare for him. "Sometimes I don't know where the role ends and the man begins." "I know." She pressed her lips to his chest, right over his heart. "The man is the one who makes me breakfast, who remembers I like my coffee with too much cream, who kisses my forehead when he thinks I'm asleep." His arms tightened around her. "Those moments with you are the only time I feel real." It was the most vulnerable thing he'd ever said to her, and she treasured it like a secret. But their sanctuary had walls made of time, and time was something they had less of than either of them knew. One evening, about a month after they'd started seeing each other, Elena noticed something different. Dante was distracted during dinner, his phone buzzing constantly, his jaw tight. He kept checking it, typing quick responses, and though he tried to stay present with her, she could tell his mind was elsewhere. "Is everything okay?" she asked finally. He looked up from his phone, and for a moment, his mask slipped. She saw worry there, anger, work issue. "Nothing for you to concern yourself with." "Dante." "Elena." His voice was firm. "There are parts of my life you can't be involved in. This is one of them." It stung, the first crack in their perfect bubble. She set down her fork, suddenly not hungry. "I'm not asking to be involved. I'm asking if you're okay." His expression softened. He reached across the table and took her hand. "I'm sorry. I'm not used to having someone who cares, someone I need to explain things to." He sighed. "There's a situation with a rival family. They're pushing into our territory, testing boundaries. It needs to be handled." "Handled how?" "Elena, I'm not naive, Dante. I know what your world is. I know what handled means. She squeezed his hand. "I worry about you." Something in his expression shifted, softened further. "You worry about me." "Of course I do. You think I can just turn off my feelings when you walk out that door?" He was quiet for a long moment, studying her face like he was seeing something new. Then he stood, came around the table, and pulled her to her feet. He kissed her gently, sweetly, his hands cradling her face. "I'm careful," he said against her lips. "I'm always careful, and I have good men watching my back. This isn't my first territorial dispute. That doesn't make me worry less." "I know." He rested his forehead against hers. "But it should make you trust that I'll come back. I always come back." That night he made love to her with an intensity that felt like desperation, like he was trying to memorize her, to brand the feeling of her onto his soul. And when he left in the middle of the night, thinking she was asleep, pressing a kiss to her temple before slipping out, she lay awake in the dark and prayed to a God she wasn't sure she believed in anymore. Please bring him back. Please keep him safe. Because she knew now, with a certainty that terrified her, that she'd fallen completely, irrevocably in love with a man who lived on the edge of violence. And love, she was learning, is the most dangerous weapon of all. He came back at dawn, smelling of smoke and something metallic she didn't want to identify. His knuckles were bruised. There was a cut on his cheek, but he was alive, and when he slid into bed beside her and pulled her against his chest, she didn't ask questions. She just held him and let him be silent. "I love you," she whispered against his neck, the words escaping before she could stop them. He went still. For a horrible moment, she thought she'd made a mistake, that it was too soon, too much, too real. But then his arms tightened around her almost painfully, and his voice, rough and raw, said, "Say it again. I love you. Again. I love you, Dante." He buried his face in her hair, and she felt wetness against her neck that might have been tears, though she'd never ask. "I don't deserve you," he said. "I don't deserve this. Maybe not, but you have it anyway. I love you too." The words sounded foreign in his mouth, like he'd never said them before. Maybe he hadn't. "God help me, Elena, I love you too." And in the growing light of dawn, they held each other like they were the only two people in the world, because in that moment, they were. The first sign that paradise was temporary came on a Tuesday morning at the flower shop. Elena was arranging roses when two men in expensive suits walked in. They weren't customers. She could tell immediately. They moved wrong, looked wrong. Their eyes swept the shop with calculation, not appreciation. "Can I help you?" she asked, keeping the counter between them. The taller one smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You're Elena, yes? Elena Costa." Her blood went cold. "Who's asking?" "Friends of a friend." He moved closer and she fought the urge to step back. "We wanted to introduce ourselves. Let you know we're aware of your relationship with Mr. Moretti." "I don't know what you're talking about." "No?" The man's smile widened. "Pretty girl like you spending every night at his apartment? Coming and going from his businesses? You've been seen, Piccola, by a lot of people." The other man spoke, his voice heavily accented. "The boss wants you to know is you're in deep water. And Moretti, he doesn't protect his toys very well, not when he has business to attend to." "Get out," Elena said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Get out of my shop right now." "Such fire," the tall one chuckled. "We're going. But think about what we said. You're very exposed, Cara, very vulnerable, and Moretti has enemies who would love to get their hands on something he cares about." They left as casually as they'd entered, and Elena stood there shaking, her hands gripping the counter so hard her knuckles were white. She should call Dante. She should tell the security detail she knew was watching. But part of her, the part that was still the careful, quiet girl from before, wondered if this was her fault. If by being with Dante, she'd painted a target on her own back. She called him anyway. He answered on the first ring. "Eleanor? There were men here at the shop. They knew who I was. They knew about us. Dante, they threatened. Are you hurt?" His voice was sharp, controlled. "No, I'm fine, but stay where you are. Don't move. Don't go anywhere. I'm sending men now, and I'll be there in 10 minutes. He hung up before she could respond. He arrived in 8 minutes, a black car screeching to a halt outside the shop, and when he walked through the door, his face was a mask of cold fury. Elena had never seen him like this, and not controlled, not careful, but absolutely lethal. His men flanked him, and one of them, a man named Marco, immediately started checking the shop, the back room, the street outside. Dante crossed to her and gripped her shoulders. "Tell me exactly what they said. Word for word." She did, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to stay calm, and with every word, she watched his expression darken further. "Russo family," he said finally, his voice like ice. "They're pushing harder than I thought." "Who are they?" "Rivals. They've been trying to move into my territory for months." His hands gentled on her shoulders, but his eyes were still hard. "I should have known they'd try this. Should have anticipated." He stopped, shook his head. "This is my fault." "No." "Yes." He looked at her, and she saw something she'd never seen before. Fear. Not for himself, but for her. "I brought you into this. I made you a target. I should have stayed away from you." "Don't say that. It's true." He pulled her against his chest, held her tight. "But I can't let you go now. I won't. So we adapt." "What does that mean?" He pulled back, his hands framing her face. It means you can't work here anymore. It's too exposed, too easy for them to get to you. Dante, I can't just quit my job. You can and you will. His voice was firm, brooking no argument. I'll compensate you. Whatever you're making, I'll double it, triple it. But you're not staying here where anyone can walk in off the street. She wanted to argue, wanted to assert her independence. But the memory of those men, their cold eyes, their casual threats made her nod. Okay, I'm moving you, he continued, to a safe apartment, one of mine, with security. You'll have guards with you whenever you leave. I know it's not ideal. I don't care about ideal. She looked up at him. I care about you, about us. If this is what we need to do to be safe, then we do it. Relief flashed across his face. He kissed her then, hard and desperate. I'm going to end this, he promised against her lips. The Russos won't touch you again, I swear it. Don't do anything stupid. Define stupid. Dante. He smiled, but it was a cold thing. I promise I'll be smart. I'll be careful. But they threatened you, Elena. They came to your place of work and scared you. That requires a response. She knew there was no point arguing. This was his world, his rules. All she could do was trust that he knew what he was doing. That night he moved her to a different apartment. A safe house, he called it, though it was nicer than any place she'd ever lived. 2 bedrooms, bulletproof windows, guards posted outside 24/7. He stayed with her, cancelled his meetings, and held her while she tried to process how quickly her life had changed. I'm sorry, he said in the darkness. I'm so sorry I brought this to your door. I chose this. She turned in his arms to face him. I knew what you were, what your life was. I chose it anyway. You didn't know it would be like this. No, she touched his face, but I'm not running. If you think some thugs threatening me is enough to scare me away, you don't know me very well. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. You're either very brave or very stupid. Maybe both. She managed a smile. But I'm yours. That hasn't changed. Good. His arms tightened around her. Because I'm not letting go. Not now. Not ever. But even as they held each other, even as they tried to pretend everything was fine, Eleanor could feel it. The first cracks in their perfect world. The danger wasn't abstract anymore. It was real. It had a face, and it wanted to hurt her to hurt him. Forbidden love always carries a price. And theirs was coming due. The Russo family made their next move 3 days later, a bombing at one of Dante's nightclubs. No one died, thank God, but 5 people were injured and the message was clear. We can touch you. We can touch what's yours. Dante's response was immediate and brutal. Eleanor didn't know the details. He kept that part of his life carefully separated from her, but she saw the news reports, saw the articles about gang violence escalating in the city, saw the fear in people's eyes, and she saw what it did to him. Dante became harder, more closed off. He still held her at night, still made love to her with the same desperate intensity, but during the day he was someone else, someone colder, more dangerous. He had meetings at all hours, phone calls in Italian that he took in other rooms, bruised knuckles that he wouldn't explain. The man who made her breakfast and kissed her forehead was disappearing, replaced by the Mafia boss she'd always known he could be. Talk to me, she begged one night when he came home late and poured himself a scotch instead of coming to bed. Please, Dante, don't shut me out. I'm protecting you. By pushing me away? By keeping you separate from this. He downed the scotch in one swallow and poured another. You don't want to know what I've been doing, Elena, what I've had to do to keep you safe. Yes, I do. She crossed to him, took the glass from his hand and set it down. I love you, all of you. Not just the parts that are easy. You don't know what you're asking. Then tell me. He looked at her for a long moment, his dark eyes searching hers. And then, finally, he spoke. He told her about the war he was fighting, about the Russo family's push into his territory, and what it would mean if he didn't stop them, about the men he'd lost, good men, loyal men, men with families who were now widows and orphans, about the violence he'd authorized, the operations he'd ordered, the blood that was being spilled because the Russos had decided to test him. And the worst part, he said, his voice raw, is that it's all because of you. They saw you. They figured out you're my weakness. And now they're using that. Every move they make, every attack they launch, it's designed to make me scared, to make me sloppy, because they know I'll do anything to keep you safe. Elena felt like she'd been punched. So this is my fault? No. He gripped her shoulders. Don't you dare think that. This is their fault and mine, for not anticipating it, but not yours. Never yours. But if I wasn't here, then I'd be empty. His voice was fierce. You think I'd trade you for peace? You think I'd choose a world without you in it, even if it meant this war ended? I wouldn't. I won't. You're the only good thing in my life, Elena. The only thing that makes me feel human. So don't you dare suggest that you're the problem. She kissed him then, tasting the scotch on his lips, feeling the tension in his body. What do? We survive. We fight. We win. He rested his forehead against hers. And I keep you safe, no matter what it costs. The safe house became their world. Elena couldn't leave without an armed escort, couldn't go back to the flower shop, couldn't see her mother without arranging it days in advance with Dante's security team. It felt like being in prison, except the bars were invisible, and the guards were there to keep people out, not keep her in. She tried to be understanding, tried to remember that this was temporary, that Dante was doing everything he could to end the war. But some days she felt like she was suffocating. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after the bombing, she snapped. She was pacing the apartment like a caged animal when Dante came home early, and the moment she saw him, everything bubbled over. I can't do this anymore, she said. I can't live like this. I feel like I'm disappearing. Eleanor? No. She held up a hand. I know you're trying to protect me. I know this isn't your fault, but I'm going crazy, Dante. I'm 21 years old, and I'm trapped in this apartment like I'm 80. I can't work. I can't see my friends. I barely see my mother. I'm just waiting for you to win this war, waiting for my life to start again. He crossed to her, but she backed away. Don't touch me and make me forget why I'm angry. He stopped, his hands falling to his sides. What do you want me to do? I want to matter. The words burst out of her. I want to feel like I'm part of your life, not just some possession you keep locked away for safekeeping. I want to help. I want to be useful. I want to... Her voice broke. I want to be with you, not just waiting for you. His expression cracked. You think you don't matter? Elena, you're the only thing that matters. I'm fighting this war for you. Everything I'm doing is to keep you safe. I know that. But what good is safety if I'm not living? If I'm just existing in this box you've put me in? He was silent for a long moment. Then, you're right. She blinked, surprised. What? You're right. He ran a hand through his hair, looking more tired than she'd ever seen him. I've been so focused on protecting you that I forgot you're not just something to protect. You're a person, with needs, with a life, and I've been taking that from you. Dante, come with me tomorrow, he said suddenly, to a meeting, not the dangerous kind, a business meeting with people I trust. You'll be safe, but you'll be with me. You'll see that part of my life. And then we'll figure out how to make this work better, how to give you your life back while keeping you safe. She searched his face. You mean it? I mean it. He crossed to her then, and this time she let him pull her close. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I made you feel trapped. That was never my intention. I know. She pressed her face against his chest. I just want us to be partners, not you protecting me while I sit in the shadows. Then that's what we'll be. He kissed the top of her head. Partners. Equals. Even in this mess. It was a promise he would try to keep, but the universe, it seemed, had other plans. The meeting the next day was at one of Dante's legitimate businesses, a high-end restaurant in the financial district. Eleanor dressed carefully in one of the elegant outfits Dante had bought her, trying to look like she belonged in his world. They drove there together, his hand resting on her thigh, his thumb drawing absent circles through the fabric of her dress. You'll be fine, he assured her. These are my business partners. Clean money, clean operations. They know about you, and they've been instructed to treat you with respect. What if they don't like me? Then they're idiots. He squeezed her leg. Besides, you're with me. That's all that matters. The restaurant was beautiful, all white tablecloths and crystal chandeliers, and the quiet murmur of wealth. Dante led her to a private room in the back where 3 men were already seated. They stood when Dante entered, greeting him with handshakes and respectful nods. Their eyes tracked to Elena with curiosity. Gentlemen, Dante said, his hand at the small of Elena's back, this is Elena Costa, my companion. The word felt insufficient, but she understood why he used it. In his world, labels carried meaning and consequence. They were polite, professional, but she could feel them assessing her, wondering what a girl like her was doing with a man like Dante. The meeting was mostly business talk, numbers and contracts and things Elena didn't fully understand, but she sat beside Dante, quiet and attentive, and when he occasionally glanced at her or touched her hand, she felt included, like she mattered. It was during the meeting that it happened. One of Dante's men, Carlo, a young guy who worked security, burst into the room, his face pale. "Boss, we have a situation. Marco." He glanced at Elena, hesitating. "Speak," Dante commanded, his voice hard. "Marco's been feeding information to the Russos. We caught him making a call. He was telling them about the shipment tomorrow night." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Dante stood slowly, and Elena had never seen him look so dangerous. "Where is he?" "Downstairs, in the car." "Good." Dante turned to the business partners. "Gentlemen, we'll continue this later." Then to Elena, "Stay here. Don't leave this room." "Dante, stay here." It was a command, not a request, and his eyes told her not to argue. He left with Carlo, and the room fell silent. The business partners exchanged glances, but said nothing. Elena sat there, her heart racing, her mind spinning. Marco, the same Marco who'd been at the apartment, who'd been part of Dante's inner circle. He'd betrayed them. And Dante, she didn't want to think about what Dante was going to do to him. 20 minutes later, Dante returned. His face was calm, expressionless, but there was blood on his knuckles. Fresh blood. He crossed to Elena and held out his hand. "Come, we're leaving." She took his hand and stood, trying not to look at the blood, trying not to think about it. They walked out of the restaurant together, and Dante's men formed a protective circle around them as they moved to the car. No one spoke. No one looked at them directly. In the car, Elena finally found her voice. "Is he dead?" Dante didn't look at her. "Yes." "Did you?" "Yes." Now he did look at her, and his eyes were hard. "He betrayed me. He put you in danger. There's only one response to that." She should be horrified, should be running, but all she felt was a strange sense of relief. "Okay." He blinked, surprised. "Okay? I'm not going to pretend I understand your world. I'm not going to judge you for doing what you had to do." She reached over and took his bloodied hand in hers. "But I need you to promise me something." "What?" "Don't shut me out, don't push me away because you think I can't handle this. I can handle more than you think." He stared at her for a long moment, something like wonder in his eyes. Then he pulled her across the seat and into his lap, held her tight against his chest. "How are you real?" he murmured against her hair. "How are you this strong?" "I'm not strong. I'm terrified. But I love you. And love means staying, even when it's ugly. It's going to get uglier." His voice was heavy. Marco knew things he shouldn't have known, which means there's another leak, someone else feeding information. What does that mean? It means I can't trust my own people. It means the Russos have gotten deeper than I thought. He pulled back to look at her, his hands framing her face. "And it means I need to end this. Soon, before someone else gets hurt." "How?" His smile was cold. "By making them understand that touching what's mine has consequences, permanent ones." That night, Dante made love to her with a gentleness that belied the violence of the day. He washed the blood from his hands first. She watched him at the sink, scrubbing until the water ran clear, and then he came to her. He undressed her slowly, kissed every inch of exposed skin, made her forget about the darkness of his world. And when he finally entered her, when he moved inside her with a slow, deliberate rhythm, he whispered, "You're the only good thing in my life, the only light." "Then don't let go," she whispered back. "Never." But even as they clung to each other, even as they tried to pretend the rest of the world didn't exist, Elena could feel it. The storm was coming, and when it hit, it would test everything they'd built. Forbidden love is a candle in a hurricane, beautiful, fragile, and so easy to extinguish. The call came at 3 in the morning, Dante's phone buzzing insistently on the nightstand. Elena felt him wake immediately. He slept like a soldier, alert even in rest, and reached for it. She heard his voice, low and controlled. "When? Where?" "I'm on my way." He was out of bed and dressing before she could ask. "What's wrong?" "The Russos hit one of my warehouses. There are casualties." He was pulling on pants, a shirt, moving with the efficient speed of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. "I'm coming with you." "No. Dante." "No." He turned to her, his face hard. "This is exactly the kind of situation I need you away from. Stay here, lock the door, my men are outside. You can't keep doing this. You can't keep shutting me out every time it gets dangerous. Watch me." He grabbed his gun from the safe. She hadn't even known he kept a gun in the apartment, and checked the clip with practiced ease. "Eleanor, I don't have time to argue. People are hurt. People are dead. I need to handle this." "Fine." She climbed out of bed, pulled on her robe. "But we're talking about this when you get back. Really talking." He crossed to her, kissed her hard and fast. "I love you. Remember that, no matter what happens." And then he was gone. Elena stood in the quiet apartment, her heart pounding, and tried not to think about what "no matter what happens" might mean. She paced, made coffee she didn't drink, checked her phone every 30 seconds. The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. Dawn came and went. Morning turned to afternoon. And still no word from Dante. At 2 o'clock there was a knock at the door. Elena's heart leaped, but when she looked through the peephole, it wasn't Dante. It was a woman, tall, elegant, with dark hair and cold eyes. Elena didn't recognize her, but something in her gut told her to be careful. "Who are you?" she called through the door. "A friend of Dante's. He sent me to check on you." The woman's voice was smooth, cultured. "May I come in?" "No. If Dante wanted someone to check on me, he'd have called." The woman laughed. "Smart girl, I can see why he likes you." She moved closer to the door, and Elena could see her more clearly now. Beautiful, expensive clothes, the kind of woman who belonged in Dante's world. "My name is Isabella Russo." Eleanor's blood went cold. "Russo, as in the rival family, as in the people trying to kill Dante. I have nothing to say to you. Even if I have information about Dante, about where he is right now." Elena hesitated. "What kind of information?" "The kind that could save his life, or end it, depending on what you decide to do." Isabella's smile was sharp. "I'm going to leave now, but here's my card." She slid something under the door. "Call me when you're ready to talk. And Eleanor, time is running out. For both of you." She left, her heels clicking on the marble floor of the hallway, and Eleanor stood there shaking. She picked up the card with trembling fingers. Just a phone number, nothing else. She called Dante immediately. It went straight to voicemail. She tried again, and again. Nothing. Finally, she called one of his men, Antonio, who'd been kind to her. He answered on the second ring. "Miss Costa? Where's Dante? I can't reach him, and a woman named Isabella Russo was just here." "Russo?" His voice sharpened. "What did she want?" "She said she had information about Dante. Said his life was in danger." "Antonio, what's going on?" There was a long pause. "Miss Costa, I need you to stay calm. The boss, he's in a situation. The warehouse hit was a trap. He's pinned down with some of our men. We're working on getting them out, but it's complicated." "How complicated?" "The Russos have the building surrounded. They're demanding a meeting, a negotiation, but the boss won't leave his men." "Of course he won't." She was pacing again, her mind racing. "What did Isabella want? Why did she come here?" "I don't know, but nothing a Russo offers is free. Whatever she told you, be careful." After they hung up, Elena stared at the card in her hand. She knew she shouldn't call, knew it was probably a trap. But if there was even a chance that Isabella could help, if there was any way to get Dante out of that building safely, she dialed the number. "I knew you'd call," Isabella answered, smug, satisfied. "What do you want?" "A meeting. Just you and me, neutral ground. I'll tell you how to save your boyfriend and you'll do something for me in return." "What?" "We'll discuss it when we meet. Tonight, 9 o'clock. I'll text you the address." She paused. "Come alone, Elena. If I see any of Dante's men, the deal's off and he dies in that warehouse." The line went dead. Elena stood there, her hands shaking, her mind spinning. She should tell Antonio, should call Dante's people and let them handle it. But what if telling them put Dante in more danger? What if the Russos had a spy in his organization and found out? Marco had been selling information. Who else might be? She looked at the card again, at her phone, at her reflection in the darkened window. And she made a choice. She would go to the meeting, alone. Not because she thought she could outsmart Isabella Russo, but because she couldn't just sit here while Dante was in danger. She couldn't be the passive damsel waiting to be rescued. If forbidden love meant risk, then she would risk everything, even herself. She wrote a note, just in case, and left it on the counter. I love you. I'm sorry. I had to try. And then she walked out the door, past the guards who tried to stop her, and got into a taxi, toward Isabella Russo, toward danger, toward whatever came next. The address Isabella had sent led to an upscale cafe in a part of the city Elena barely knew. All boutique shops and art galleries and people who wore their wealth casually, Elena felt out of place in her simple dress and practical shoes, but she walked in anyway, her chin up, her fear carefully hidden. Isabella was waiting at a corner table, a glass of wine in front of her. She looked up when Eleanor entered, and her smile was all teeth. You came. Good. Sit. Eleanor sat, but kept her bag in her lap, her phone easily accessible. I'm here. Talk. Straight to business. I like that. Isabella took a sip of wine. Here's the situation. My brother, Matteo Russo, has Dante and 6 of his men trapped in that warehouse. It's been 12 hours. They're running out of time. Matteo wants this war to end with Dante's death, a statement to the other families that the Russos are not to be trifled with. So why help me? Because I don't want my brother to win. Isabella's smile faded. Matteo is reckless, violent. If he kills Dante, he'll think he's invincible. He'll push harder, demand more, and eventually he'll destroy our family from the inside out. But if Dante survives, if I help him survive, then he owes me. And that's much more valuable than my brother's revenge. What do you want? Peace. A truce. I want this war to end without more bloodshed. I want both families to back off and return to their territories. And I want Dante to agree to sit down with me and negotiate new boundaries. Eleanor studied her. Why would Dante trust you after everything your family has done? Because I'll give him something he wants more than revenge. You, alive, safe, and his men safely home. She leaned forward. Here's my offer. I get Matteo to stand down. I convince him to let Dante and his men walk out of that warehouse. In exchange, Dante meets with me. Just me, no weapons, no threats. And we negotiate an end to this war. And you, she paused, you walk away. Elena's stomach dropped. What? You're the problem, Elena. The reason this war escalated. Matteo saw you with Dante and realized he'd found a weakness. As long as you're in the picture, you're a target, a liability. So if you really want to save Dante's life, if you really love him, you walk away permanently. You disappear from his world, and in exchange I make sure he survives tonight. You're asking me to leave him. I'm asking you to save him. Isabella's voice was hard. Love isn't always about staying, Elena. Sometimes it's about knowing when to let go. Elena felt like she couldn't breathe. He'll never agree to this. He won't have a choice. By the time he finds out, it'll be done. You'll be gone, he'll be alive, and the war will be over. She pushed a folder across the table. Inside is a new identity. Passport, driver's license, bank account with enough money to start over anywhere you want. All you have to do is use it. Tonight. Before Dante gets out of that warehouse. And if I don't? Isabella's smile was sad. Then Matteo kills him, along with his men. And their blood is on your hands. The world tilted. Elena stared at the folder, at Isabella, at her own reflection in the window. This couldn't be real, this couldn't be the choice. Stay and watch Dante die, or leave and save him by breaking both their hearts. How do I know you'll keep your word? Elena's voice was barely a whisper. You don't. But what choice do you have? Isabella stood, leaving money on the table for the wine. You have 2 hours to decide. If you take the deal, text me. If not, she shrugged. Well, I tried. She left, and Elena sat there alone, the folder in front of her like a loaded gun. She thought about Dante, about the way he looked at her, the way he held her, the way he'd promised to never let go. She thought about the life they'd started to build, fragile and forbidden as it was. She thought about waking up in his arms every morning, about the sound of his laugh, about the Italian words he whispered in the dark. And she thought about him dying in that warehouse, surrounded by men who depended on him, all because she'd been too selfish to walk away. She opened the folder, a passport with her picture but a different name, bank statements showing an account with $500,000, instructions for a flight leaving in 3 hours to Paris. Paris. She'd always wanted to see Paris. She picked up her phone and texted Isabella. I'll do it, save him. The response came immediately. Smart choice. Get on that plane. Don't look back. Eleanor stood on shaking legs and walked out of the cafe. She went back to the apartment, briefly, just long enough to pack a small bag. She left her phone on the counter next to the note she'd already written. She couldn't take it. Dante could track it. She took one last look at the bed they'd shared, at his shirt hanging over a chair, at the life she was leaving behind, and then she left. She made it to the airport, through security, to the gate. She sat there, waiting for boarding to begin, and every part of her screamed to turn around, to go back, to fight for him instead of running. But then her mind showed her Dante's face, his laugh, his hands, his promises, and she thought, I'm doing this for you. I'm saving you the only way I know how, even if it destroys me, even if you never forgive me, even if I never forgive myself. The announcement came for boarding. Elena stood, walked to the gate, handed over her new passport with its new name, and stepped onto the plane that would take her away from the only man she'd ever loved. Dante walked out of that warehouse at midnight, covered in blood that wasn't all his, with his men beside him and rage in his heart. Isabella Russo had been true to her word. Matteo had backed off, the police had been kept away, and the negotiation had ended without more death. But Dante knew there was a cost. With people like Isabella, there was always a cost. He tried calling Elena immediately. No answer. He tried again, and again. Nothing. Cold dread settled in his chest. He sent men to the safe house. They found it empty. Her phone on the counter. A note that said, I love you. I'm sorry. I had to try. Find her, Dante commanded, his voice deadly calm. I don't care what it takes. Find her. His men spread out across the city. They checked cameras, called contacts, tracked every lead, and slowly the picture came together. Elena at a cafe with Isabella Russo. Elena at the apartment packing. Elena at the airport. Gone. Dante stood in the empty apartment, holding her note, and felt something inside him break. She'd left, walked away. And he didn't know if it was because she was scared, or because she'd been threatened, or because she'd simply decided he wasn't worth the danger. Antonio found him there. Boss, we found something. Airline manifest. A passenger with a similar description flew to Paris 3 hours ago. Different name, but find out everything about that identity. Who issued it? Who paid for it? Dante's voice was hollow. And find out what Isabella Russo offered her. It took 2 days to uncover the truth. The new identity, the money, the threat Isabella had made, the choice Elena had been forced to make. When Dante learned what had happened, he destroyed his study, threw glasses, flipped furniture, put his fist through a wall. His men gave him space, knew better than to intervene. And when the rage finally burned itself out, he sat among the wreckage and felt something worse than anger. Grief. She'd left to save him, had sacrificed everything they'd built, because Isabella had convinced her it was the only way to keep him alive, and she'd done it without telling him, without giving him a choice, without saying goodbye. He wanted to hate her for it, wanted to be angry, but all he felt was empty. Find her, he told Antonio. I don't care how long it takes. Find her and bring her home. Boss, if she doesn't want to be found, I don't care. His voice was steel. She's mine. She'll always be mine. And I don't leave what's mine behind. 3 weeks later, Dante stood outside a small apartment in Paris. His men had tracked Elena through her new bank account, surveillance footage, the careful trail she'd left without meaning to. She was working at a flower shop again, of course she was, in a quiet neighborhood far from the center of the city, living small, living careful, living without him. He knocked on the door. She opened it, and the look on her face, a shock, fear, joy, grief all at once, nearly broke him. Dante, you left. His voice was rough, barely controlled. You walked away. You made a decision for both of us without asking what I wanted. I was saving you. I didn't want to be saved. He stepped inside, closed the door behind him. I wanted you. I've always wanted you. And you took that choice away from me. You would have died. Then I would have died with you. He was shouting now, months of fear and anger and grief pouring out. You think living without you is better? You think surviving is worth anything if you're not there? She was crying, tears streaming down her face. I couldn't watch you die. I couldn't live with that. So I made a choice. Maybe it was the wrong choice, But it's the one I made. He closed the distance between them and pulled her into his arms. She struggled at first, but he held her tight, held her until she stopped fighting and just clung to him. You don't get to decide for me, he said against her hair. You don't get to sacrifice yourself and expect me to be grateful. We're partners, remember? That means we make decisions together. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I'm so sorry. I thought it was the only way. It wasn't. He pulled back, cupped her face in his hands. I made a deal with Isabella. A truce. New territory boundaries. Peace between the families. I gave up things I shouldn't have had to give up. All to end the war, all to make it safe for you to come home. Home. You're my home, Elena. Wherever you are, that's where I belong. He kissed her then, tasting salt and sorrow, and 3 weeks of missing her. Come back with me. Come back to where you're supposed to be. What if it happens again? What if someone else tries to use me against you? Then we fight, together. But we don't run. Not from each other. Not anymore. His thumbs brushed away her tears. I love you. I've loved you since that first day you walked into my world with your white dress and your careful hands, and I'm not walking away from that. From you. Ever. She kissed him back, desperately, hungrily. I love you too. God, I missed you so much. Then say yes, come home, be with me. Yes. She laughed through her tears. Yes. Always yes. They flew back to the city that night, back to the life they'd built. Back to the danger and the beauty and the complicated mess of loving someone from a different world. But this time, Elena didn't hide. This time, she stood beside him, at his meetings, at his businesses, in his world. She learned the names of his men, the rules of his life, the balance between danger and love, and Dante kept his promise. He protected her, but more than that, he let her protect him too. Let her be his partner in truth, not just in word. The Mafia boss and the flower girl. Forbidden love that refused to be extinguished. They married 6 months later, in a small ceremony with only his most trusted men and her mother as witnesses. Elena wore white, always white, but this time it didn't feel like innocence. It felt like choice, like claiming the life she wanted regardless of what anyone else thought. Their wedding night, wrapped in Egyptian cotton with the city lights painting shadows across their skin, Dante whispered against her lips, You ruined me, you know. The day you walked into that funeral, you ruined me for anyone else. Good, she whispered back, because you're mine now, and I don't share. He laughed, actually laughed, and made love to her with the fierce tenderness that had become their language. And afterward, holding her close, he made her a new promise. Whatever comes, we face it together. No more running, no more secrets. Just us. Just us, she agreed. And for the first time since this wild, impossible, forbidden love had begun, Elena felt truly safe. Not because there was no danger. There would always be danger in Dante's world, but because she wasn't facing it alone. She was 21 and untouched by love when she met him. Now she was 22 and marked by him in every way that mattered. Some people would say she'd been ruined, but Elena knew better. She hadn't been ruined. She'd been awakened, and she would never apologize for that. Not for him, not for this love, not for choosing temptation over safety, passion over caution, life over merely existing, because some loves are worth the risk, some loves are worth the fall. And Dante Moretti, with his dark eyes and his dangerous hands, and the way he'd taught her what it meant to surrender, he was worth everything. The story of Elena and Dante didn't end that night. It couldn't. Love stories in their world don't have endings, only beginnings and middles and the spaces in between where you choose every single day to stay or go, to fight or surrender, to love or leave. They chose love every time. There would be more challenges, more threats, moments when the darkness of his world threatened to swallow them whole. But they faced it all together, the Mafia boss and his flower girl, two people from different universes who somehow found a way to exist in the same space. She learned to navigate his world without losing herself. He learned to be vulnerable without seeing it as weakness. They built something rare, a partnership forged in fire and tempered by time. And on quiet nights, when the city slept and they lay tangled together in the darkness, Eleanor would sometimes touch the ring on her finger and marvel at how far she'd come, from the girl who lived in whispers to the woman who stood beside a king of shadows, from untouched to claimed, from innocent to knowing. Do you regret it? Dante asked her once, reading her silence. All of this? She looked at him. This dangerous, beautiful man who'd turned her world upside down and taught her what it meant to be truly alive, and smiled. Not for a second. And she meant it, because she was 21 and untouched by love when she met him. But temptation had found her anyway, and it had changed everything. If this story reminded you of the moment you chose love over safety, of the time you surrendered to something you knew could destroy you, then you understand Elena's choice. Some hearts were made for wild, impossible, forbidden love. And some stories, the ones that matter, don't end. They just become part of who we are.